Take it away, Michaela.
Amazing. Thank you, Em. And like Em said, this is our third time with Kirsty. She's an expert on all things founder brand and making it work for your business. So we're super excited to have a hotbed summer session with her today. So maybe Kirsty, it'd be great if you could start off just by giving a little bit of your background and walking us through kind of what led you to the world of PR initially, brand storytelling, and then ultimately founding your own company with Luminous PR.
Great. Well, good morning, Michaela, and good morning, everybody. It's really nice to see you. Um, I'm Kirsty Jarvis. I'm founder and CEO of Luminous PR. And Luminous is a tech PR agency that specializes specifically in working with kind of fast-growing businesses, and that can be of all different shapes and sizes. But yeah, my background really is quite varied. I started off, I studied architecture at university, which actually was a really good grounding for technology because I've always been interested in innovation. And at university, whilst doing the design side of things as well, I found that I was a really good writer. Um, so that kind of really was the thing that started me thinking about doing something with words and storytelling. And actually, if you think about it with architecture, you do have to kind of create a scheme, you have to create concepts, and you have to be able to sell them, whether you're pitching to your tutors or whether you're going to pull a scheme out there. So it was kind of a good grounding for me. But then, yeah, from then onwards, went into working with like kind of highly technical businesses, both in sort of technology, a little bit in design, but also in digital, as digital kind of over the last 20 years has really seen a massive influx. I've done a lot of work with startups and fast growing businesses, and was very fortunate in my early career to actually be part of a startup that was going through rapid growth, which was great. But then, really took my writing and my PR and marketing side of things that I really kind of learned on the job, and found that that was really where my niche was. And worked for a few agencies, helped a really successful founder actually to grow a tech PR business right from the beginning, but really felt probably in my early 30s that I had some kind of entrepreneurialism that I wanted to explore within my blood. And that was really how Luminous was born because, I knew I'd worked in a few businesses, I'd worked in a few agencies, and I could see some of the things that, they were perhaps doing that I perhaps wouldn't do or I wanted to do differently. And I think startup PR is a very different beast to doing PR for, bigger brands or brands that have got a lot of established traction in the market. So that's why Luminous really has right from the beginning been a real specialism in working with those kind of small businesses. So that's kind of how I landed here. If we have time at the end, I will also say I did a little diversion. I was a jazz singer as well at the beginning of Luminous's journey, but that's probably a story for another time.
Amazing. That is a new fact. I did not know that. Excited to hear about it. So maybe jumping in and understanding why a founder's personal voice is more important now than ever in building a company brand.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we all can relate to the fact that it's a very, very noisy environment at the moment. There's just multiple channels springing up all the time. There's obviously a huge amount of people, thankfully, that are doing, trying their hand at being a startup. But ultimately, it's really competitive. With a lot of noise means that you have to be you have to be forefront and center if you're trying to build something, especially in those early days. Really, it's really tough for startups out there at the moment, through investment, through trying to compete for talent. As you're growing, all of those things form the fabric of what becomes a really, really great business. And so ultimately, I think the founder's voice, I think, is more important than it's ever been, because there will never be anyone working for your brand that is more passionate and more of an advocate about your brand. And really, at the beginning stage, we all know, I mean, the word hustle, I think, has had quite a mixed reaction over the years, but I'm still quite a firm believer in hustle. And I think certainly anyone that's growing a startup will know that sometimes you have to get in there and you just have to make it happen. And the founder part of that is you might not have a profile, and you've got to be, for people to take you seriously, you have to be able to be seen, and when people Google you or they're looking you up on various channels, you need to be present and you need to be visible.
Awesome. I think this is a great segue into our next point. So I think a lot of founders think they have to have a personal brand. And can you just distinguish between what you call a founder brand and the difference between those two?
Yeah, so I anyone that's perhaps heard me talk about this before is I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the term personal branding. I think it definitely has a time and a place, and I think it's great if there for a number of different times within an individual's career to have a personal brand. I think the difference between the personal brand and what is a founder brand is ultimately personal branding is about kind of you kind of approach that really with an influencer mindset. So this is about, how can you raise your profile? How can you get more opportunities for yourself? Whereas actually a founder brand is really more impact mindset. So it's actually, what do you need your business to achieve in the next 3 to 6 months? And how can you, as the most prominent person talking about your brand, really push that forward? Um, so there is a kind of subtle difference, and what I find when I work with founders at the beginning, because they often, are super busy people, as we all are, and it's almost like that, you should be doing a little bit more whenever we say this to them to be pushing your brand forward. There's always a bit of an eye roll moment, but what I find actually gets them more interested is if you start to think about it like, this is not about you pushing your profile, because everyone feels a little bit uncomfortable about that. This is about what you are hustling to do to make your business move forward. And I think if you start looking at it like that, it feels a little bit better.
Awesome. And would love to touch on, you mentioned that kind of resistance in the beginning. What are some of the benefits that walk founders through of investing in this founder brand early on for their business?
Well, I think when you say early on, I think that's a really important point because it takes time to build a brand, whether you're building a business brand or whether you're building something for yourself as an individual. So starting early really will be the thing that gives you a good foundation for when you really need it. Now, most people, when they start a business, they have a little bit of experience in the area that they're working in, or they have some kind of viewpoint or opinion. So even before you click the button and launch something immediately out into the world, anything you can do from an early point that gets you that community, gets you that audience, gets you a little bit of buzz around you and what you're looking at doing, or the people that resonates with the people that you might be wanting to work with, even if it's in 12 months time, that kind of building that brand will be beneficial. Because if you suddenly click live on what you're doing and then you start, you're playing catch up. So I think you're absolutely right to sort of point out that actually doing some storytelling for yourself early on is really important. But once you have that brand built, having that ready-made audience, that community, that will then help you when you get your early goals and those things to sort of get moving. Because we all know whether it's attracting investors or whether even if you maybe have had a little bit of investment and you're looking at growing team, you will be looked at. So there's so many kind of business benefits for you having something positive or some positive perception about you out, and thinking about where is appropriate for you to have that kind of activity happening as well is something that you probably should start thinking about early on strategically. And even just having a conversation with someone that knows what they're doing, that can kind of help give you some ideas, because there are so many different channels from an early standpoint that people have. I think we all feel like we have to be present on all of them, but actually really looking and understanding who the personas that you're trying to sell to, like who are the people that would really help your business move, and then where do they hang out, and then what can you do from a strategy perspective that helps them. All of those things are great, but you've got to start early before you really, really need those things to count, because often investors are wanting, return and results quite quickly.
Awesome. And when you're thinking about, crafting your messages and your voice, what are some elements that make up an effective and credible founder voice on these platforms?
Yeah, credibility is, I think, a really good word. And I think we're becoming more discerning as consumers of content, of sniffing out the people that are credible and the people that aren't. So I think that's a really good point. And from my perspective, I think credibility comes from A number of different areas, but primarily, I think showing that you are an authority, so you have a viewpoint and you are educated and well clued up on what it is that your potential industry or your potential clients really want to know. That is a really, that helps build credibility. And again, you can do those things right from the beginning. You don't even need to have kind of tangible business success stories to be able to build an authority in something. um, Experience, if you have experience, far too many people don't really talk about, their historical moments in their career or things that really help them. And that can help with attracting customers, but it can also really help with showing an investor that you are a credible and trusted leader. Actually, if they're going to give you some money, they want to know that you as a leader are good at what you do, but also are going to take the custodianship of that, the money that they're investing, and know what you're doing with it. So showing your experience and your leadership is a really good way of showing some credibility, and evidence points as well. So anything that you have that you can anecdotally share, I think is a really good thing to think about putting into your kind of founder brand strategy for that credibility building.
Awesome. That was super helpful. And I think, you touched on a lot of these points, but is there anything like when a founder's thinking about doing these that can make them unique in a crowded market?
Yeah, it's really hard to be unique these days, isn't it? I mean, I feel we get really excited with Luminous when sometimes we get a client that comes through that's really pushing the boundaries or doing something totally new, because it doesn't come along very often. But I do think there are some things that, being unique and having a unique point of view doesn't necessarily have to be about your proposition. I think one of the things that people are relying on, and what we're noticing quite a lot, is that people are relying on tools like ChatGPT and some of these LLMs, which are amazing for helping you research and develop your point of view. But actually, some people are using it to kind of create their own point of view. And one thing that's definitely not going to make you sound unique is if you use it to write your posts, because it's just regurgitating stuff that other people have done. So um, and one of the things that we kind of advise our clients to do around finding their unique perspective is to remember that every founder has its own story and its own unique experience that got them to this point. So really thinking about yourself and taking the time to understand your lived experiences, your various perspectives on things, is a really great way of having a different point of view and creating that different point of view, where you can kind of differentiate. Another thing that's really good for having a unique point of view is if you are kind of going into some area of solving a particular challenge, and you've noticed perhaps that there isn't some research or some data that would really help you, not only from a sales perspective but also from your storytelling. Like, what's missing from the story that would be really helpful to really help you endorse why you exist and what challenge you're looking at helping people to solve. If you can come with your own unique data, then you suddenly have a really unique perspective, and that's a really cool thing to do. It doesn't have to be expensive to do that either. You can actually create a really unique stat or a piece of research from, I think some of these survey companies now will allow you to ask questions of consumers or businesses, and it's, starting from about £300, so it's not expensive to do it.
Awesome. Thank you. And maybe shifting a bit more, we've talked about it like high level. How can founders take practical steps to actually, build their brand on LinkedIn without becoming too performative or it becoming overwhelming for them?
This is such a great question, and it's one that everybody asks. And I think it is one of the main reasons why, founders don't do it. But I think the overwhelm and not really knowing what to write, etc., is a big problem. But really, like, getting started, planning is kind of your friend. I think we all, however busy we all know that actually setting some time aside to do your invoices or to run payroll or something like that, they're kind of standard standard activities that we have to do as founders. And really, I advise businesses to just craft a little bit of time, work out realistically how much time you have. It might only be 15 minutes, but making sure that you're quite regimented about keeping that as a routine, making that whether it's Monday morning, being understanding yourself as well, like where are you most creative, what time of the week, what time of the day are you most creative? For me, I'm first thing in the morning. I always do my writing first thing in the morning. I always do my big thinking first thing in the morning. So trying to kind of plan out some time, whether it's once a month, once a week, whatever it is that your schedule will allow, doing that is really important. And then when you have that time, not just creating one post from it, like really brainstorm as many different things as you can, and then scheduling as well. So keeping that, you scheduling those things in so that you can have that consistency of post, that consistency of visibility, but you're not having to think every day, oh man, I've got to do something today because it's my day of the week to do it. No one's ever going to do that, because I don't know if you're like me, but things always bump with my schedule. There's always things that kind of come in that you can't expect. So really, I think the planning and is the way of doing it, and then just being realistic about how much time you have.
Awesome. And I think we're going a little bit off here, but I just have a follow-up question around like the planning. Are there any tips you have around like, from the founder's perspective, they may feel like they're posting too many times, but really the algorithm doesn't bring it up that much on other people's feeds, and using visuals versus not. Is there any recommendations you have around setting that strategy?
Yeah, so I'm probably not the best person on my team to give you those recommendations, but what I do know, like the actual ones, the ones I do know are, yes, imagery and videos are really compelling, and they're great. The algorithm, they do favor things with more interesting content. So yes, the visuals and the videos, etc., will help. Sometimes talk to camera stuff is being done, and it's really nicely done. Actually, it doesn't have to be really polished. You don't have to look amazing when you do it. Actually, it's kind of more about that authenticity and sharing really interesting content that can be good. The algorithms also do favor you if you do post regularly. So, doing something sporadic, so going great guns for like 2 weeks and then doing nothing for 4 months is probably not amazing. I'm going to hold my hands up here and say I do as I say, not as I do. I find it really difficult. But yeah, I think that those things are the consistency and the interesting content with the visuals really help. And the more you post, then the more you will start to feed in people and the more engagement you get, because LinkedIn is valuing you on, is your is what you're posting, or all of these channels, in fact, not just LinkedIn, is it valuable? Is it getting engagement? Is it exciting? So trying to create things that are unique, interesting, educational, perhaps sparking some debate or some engagement as well is great.
Kirsty, can I just jump in there as well? Sorry, everybody, I'm from Luminous PR as well. I'm sitting in the background. But you might notice on LinkedIn that you're starting to see posts from like 3 weeks ago. And what LinkedIn is doing is it's really like the algorithm is now identifying what's been AI written. And so it's pushing AI content right down the bottom of your feed. And that's why you're starting to see less, posts from like 3 weeks ago, because the algorithm is favoring these as human written content and really valuable. So that's also something to consider as well. I'm going to jump back off now and take my screen off. Lovely
Thanks,
to see
Amanda. She's
you.
much more of an expert on like the kind of behind the scenes of the algorithms than I am. So I'm glad she's on the call. You can jump in anytime, Amanda.
Awesome. And then maybe thinking about a step back, why do you think founders struggle so much to set their strategy for their voice, and what are the challenges they face there?
Most founders I find the whole thing about pushing themselves forward quite icky. They don't like it. It's tough. It does take a little bit of practice and getting used to doing it. So that for me is the initial first barrier. The second, and then of course all the excuses come out. So I don't have time. Yeah, I don't know what to write. And no, I don't even know where to start. I just feel like the whole thing is too immense, and I just can't. I can't do it. So I think, and all of these things are completely valid. They are completely valid. We are really busy people, founders. Time is often a challenge, which again, going back to my previous point about planning, if you're really serious about doing it, you just got to put the time in your diary and just make sure you do it. It's as simple as that. And then, strategically, often, especially with technology businesses, I find, there's such smart people with regards to innovation and building and creating something with technology, but they don't perhaps have a marketing skill set. And often businesses, when they come to us, or even when they're slightly later, they don't have the luxury of someone with a huge amount of marketing experience or PR experience or comms experience even. So again, I think this is why like doing sessions like this is really important to me. We do a lot of work with accelerators as well that tries to kind of give some of this advice and one-on-one stuff as well with businesses to just kind of help them understand like what can and should you be doing and where to go, because it is just so overwhelming to know, should I be posting on TikTok, should I do LinkedIn, how often should I blog, what about Substack, am I supposed to be doing video here? It's a minefield, and everyone mostly just says, oh, do you know what, I'm just going to look at that another day. But obviously, hopefully what I've said before this point will encourage people to think about it, as because it does have quite a lot of benefits for businesses to do it if you can start that sort of activity process quite early.
Awesome. And maybe going off of that, on when you're posting, how do you maintain your personal authenticity while still making sure you're like hitting the business communications and goals that you want to be focused on for that period?
Yeah. Well, I mean, authenticity by its very nature is about being yourself. So I think trying to replicate or be somebody else is never really going to work. You're always going to feel like you're having to act or try and put yourself in a different mindset. So the easiest and quickest way of doing something is to be yourself and to take your own expertise and viewpoints that you have. But really, being authentic, it can be in like sharing, as I said, anecdotes or things that have personally been experiences for you within your journey or with working with clients or things that you've seen. But it can also be being vulnerable at certain points. You can I think authenticity is linked really intrinsically to being human, which I think is really fascinating when now everybody is starting to use AI engines to create. And my personal, I don't know, it's a bit of a hypothesis that I think we'll reach a tipping point with this, where the people that are inherently authentic and human will be the ones that rise to the top, not just because platforms like LinkedIn are starting to favor human content, but I think we're all going to start to get bored of listening to the same kind of things. And we'll be looking at things that are, real, the kind of real stuff. So don't be afraid of that. And really sharing the things that are important to you or the things that maybe have, giving you a learning moment.
Absolutely. And I think this is a great point. I think going into that vulnerability piece, it's like can be so helpful, but do you have any advice for where the line is, and what's appropriate, what's comfortable, and what can drive engagement and authenticity, and then what maybe may be too much?
Yeah, it is a personal preference, I think. Me personally, I do have a bit of I don't know, I find it quite icky when it's very vulnerable. Like, and I think there's nothing wrong with that, providing that you have a point to what you're trying. So there is a reason that you're sharing. I think what happens with people sometimes is being a founder is a really lonely place. And actually, what happens with things like social media and posting is that if you post something quite vulnerable, you get a lot of engagement, which makes you feel like you're really successful. You feel like there's people there. You feel like what you're happening is, or what you're putting out there is actually resonating with people. But actually, people are nice and want to support you and look after you. So that's typically why you get that kind of engagement. But really, the rule of thumb is that everything you do should be really inherently grounded in what is the goal of the post that you're putting out there. What are you trying to achieve? Who are you trying to speak to? And if that message is, the best delivered through, I'm going to share something that's quite raw, quite vulnerable, and the point is, you need to listen to this because we are this solution, or I don't want you to have this same problem. Great. But I think it's, there is, the line is blurred, I suppose, is the summary of that. But the rule of thumb is you really should be thinking about the purpose of what you post.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on it a bit before, but is there anything else on balancing like frequency of personal insights or showcasing company achievements through your founder brand versus your, business posts?
Again, I think it's really very dependent on what it is that you're looking to achieve, what your goals are. So let me give you an example. If you're looking at growing your talent, your growth, your team within the business, and you've got to compete with lots of people, then more posts that shows your personality, your culture, you as people, actually, I think you are probably going to be doing more of that. Whereas if you're looking for new partners and new clients, then perhaps your posts are going to be a bit more professional. I mean, imagine if you're on a big sales drive and actually the founder is at the forefront of LinkedIn, almost looking like they're having a nervous breakdown with their founder journey. It's not going to look good. So again, you've got to kind of really think about that personal perception, and what it's looking like, and what you're trying to achieve in the next 3 months. The great thing about social and all of these kind of platforms is ultimately you are, the lifespan of these things don't last that long, but with some channels they do hold around for a while. And if people are googling, you've got to kind of really think about, okay, if I'm going to be doing this in 3 months, do I really want someone to see this?
Absolutely. And maybe touching on that channels part, you mentioned there's so many different things coming at founders and channels. What are some of the communication channels that you think early stage founders should focus on to get the highest value?
If you have very little time and you're trying to attract new clients, new opportunities, new partners, you really can't be ignoring LinkedIn. It is still the only place really where you're building those connections. You have the opportunity to network. You can sell through LinkedIn. There's great algorithms and data and stats behind the scenes that kind of help you with campaigns, etc. So I think if you've only got one capacity for one, you've got to be looking at LinkedIn. I think as you start to sell more of your proposition, obviously that will depend on whether you've got a consumer proposition or whether you're more business. But I think if it's business, you might be looking at things like Substack or Reddit as well as LinkedIn. But also, really, if you're in consumer, things like TikTok obviously are huge at the moment. And you've really got to be looking at your strategy for that. Again, I would say, like, because video is so popular at the moment and thinking about the founder brand, there is still place for founders in a consumer brand to be talking on TikTok, because, people are using it for research as well into who do they want to work with, and whether or not they align with you as a brand. So there is still place for doing that on those channels. But I think it really does depend on whether you're B2B or B2C.
Awesome. And then maybe broader than just these digital communication channels, how should early stage founders approach media and PR and kind of the other areas for communications?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to say is that not all businesses are ready for PR. And it really does depend on what stage of the business you are. Amanda works with me very closely on this. I think she would say the same thing as I. We turn away almost the same amount of businesses as we bring on as clients, because we don't want them to, be spending hard-earned investment on PR at the wrong stage. That's very close to my core values, and it's one of the reasons why I set up Luminous in the beginning, because I think it's really important. But I think there are some moments where if you do have genuinely really good news, you can't waste that as a startup, and you do need to do that properly. What we sometimes find is that some businesses fumble their way through a little bit with when they have news, and they might get some coverage, but perhaps it's not the big bang that they were expecting. if you're lucky enough to be part of an accelerator or groups like this, do reach out to people that can give you really good sort of consultancy, 1 or 2 hours of someone's time just to run some ideas past people can end up saving you a lot of money, but also could end up bringing you a lot more traction for something. Startups don't have news every day. So when you have it, you really do need to make it really work. Um, and then thinking about authority, whether you're the founder or you're looking at the brand, creating some authority, thought leadership is one of the tools that a business can really do at any stage, if they've got the time and the effort to be able to put into it. And what I mean by thought leadership, it is like podcast interviews. It's looking at creating long form articles that are non-self promotional and being able to place those in target publications where your customers are going to be reading or where you're going to be able to make some kind of impact. I think those things are the bare minimum for sort of startups that are, I would say, ready and have some things to say. But again, try to do it in small chunks. Don't take what's achievable for the size you are and the size of team you have. PR does take time to do. We always say to clients when they come on board, like, our best working relationships is where we can work really closely with you and that you lean on us and you talk to us. But it means that we're talking to you every day because there could be an opportunity that's coming up. So once you start with PR, it's important to keep that momentum going. Even if it's on just a really low level, you could just have one piece of something coming out every month that you could share on different channels. It gives you that consistency and that momentum. But I think the worst thing almost is to do a huge lot and then not do anything for ages. You almost have to reintroduce yourself right from the beginning. If you're starting to do that kind of big waves. Amanda's got some great graphs that we show people, which she's going to laugh at in a minute, where we kind of show the difference between kind of consistency and what happens, and then that sort of big traction and then nothing. And what that also does for your time, because media moves all the time. And if you have 4 months between when you start talking to your journalists, they may have all moved on. So you have to start again from building those relationships. So it's just little kind of touch points with media is a good way to start with it, I would say.
Awesome. And then maybe shifting a bit to some of the negative things before we wrap up for Q&A. So what are some of the most common mistakes that you see founders make when they're trying to build their personal or founder brand or enter into these communication channels?
Yeah, I think lack of strategy, I think it can become quite obvious when there's almost sort of the desperate posts, I've got to do something, so I'm going to fling something out, and the lack of strategy. I think we as comms professionals can kind of spot that. And actually it's really interesting when we've taken over people's LinkedIns or we've done some thought leadership for people, and we've been able to kind of almost benchmark where they are and where they become when there's a strategy behind it. If you're going to put effort into something, you want to know it's going to do something for you, right? Otherwise, why bother? So I think lack of strategy is kind of the most common pitfall that you have. I wouldn't say it's kind of a mistake, but one of the things that typically founders do, again, because it's easy, is that they'll just repost their company brand's post. So they might be, you've released a report and your brand has put it out, and then they just repost it. There's nothing wrong with reposting, but even if you're just putting 1 or 2 lines for your opinion on why that matters, that is so much more powerful than just going click, repost. No one really knows what you think about it, why you did it, how does it fit into your goals, your strategy, why is it relevant to your customers? And what we know is that individuals' profiles always have more traction and more engagement than a brand, particularly. So yeah, just even if it's just one sentence, yeah, I know I do it too, but I am like being really, really much. Amanda will tell you she's been quite tough with me. It does help as well, actually, having someone in your business, if you're lucky enough to have team with you, and you're at that stage, having someone that can help you as well, to help you own it, is great. So often doing voice notes and sending it to someone to help you craft a draft, that really helps because it's half the job done, and then you can still put your spin on it, you can still make it you, but that can be really helpful. And one of the great things about having interns and things like that, there's great resource that you can do it. But often the one thing I would say is I wouldn't leave all of that strategically to a junior member of the team or someone that's not living in your shoes, because really, you need someone writing for you that understands the challenges that you're going through and what's in your head. So really, trying working with someone to help you, but making sure the original thought comes from you is important.
Awesome. And then I think we'll transition to Q&A. So founders, you can think of some questions for Kirsty. And then just before that, is there any final like lesson or takeaway you want founders to walk away with, their role as being a brand ambassador?
Yeah, I think it's more of an observation that I just would love founders to just keep in their mind a little more. So right at the beginning, the founders are able to achieve a huge amount because they tend to be more forefront and center. They're louder, they're more hustly, they're bold, they elbow their way into things. As businesses get bigger, founders get quieter. And I think businesses do miss out on the benefit of that voice. So just being, if you're going through some really rapid growth at the moment, really think about ways that you can still try and keep that as part of, contributing to the brand's growth, actually, because it's just, I always think it's really sad, because we do know that people are looking at the person at the top, and people are making decisions about you for so many different ways when you're in business, and the different relationships you have, whether it's with your team, whether it's with partners, whether it's customers, whether it's somebody that's going to be an advocate for your brand at some point. And they are always looking at like the quality of leadership, the person that is driving the ship. So being silent, I think, is the one thing that, just to try and mitigate that as you go through periods of growth is quite important. Yeah.
Awesome. I think MICU had one question to start out with, and then founders, if you have any.
Yeah, I have one. I put one question in the chat. I'll ask that. And then I have another personal question that I hope would be relevant to other founders too. The one that I just put in the chat is like, how specific or broad should you be with what you want to be seen as an expert on in?
So, good question. I mean, you can be an expert on whatever you want to be. And actually, you're in a really different position to many, in that you span a very wide range of different touch points for your potential audience. But the rule of thumb really is think about where you are in your journey and who do you want to reach, and then become an expert on what matters to them. So often we get businesses that come to us and say, and we'll ask them, so, where is your growth coming from? Who do you want to sell to? What kind of sector is more, where your customers are at the moment? And they'll say, oh, we work with everybody. Our proposition or our strategy or our technology will work for everybody. And then when you drill down into it, you say, well, actually, no, but where's I hate this term, but where's the low hanging fruit? Where are you going to get your first customers from? Is it retail? Is it financial services? Like where are the things that you're going to pick up in the next 3 months, and then become an expert on where they are? Because you can't be an expert on everything, not properly. And by its very nature, being an expert means you've got to put a lot of work actually into really reading and digesting, and then forming your own opinion and taking time to figure out, like, what do I actually think about this? You can't do that really broadly. So you can be an expert on something for 3 months and then flip it, be an expert on something else. But I think when you're doing it, just be quite focused.
But got a question from Richard. He said, do I have to be consistent in what I post about? For example, talking about industry news, environmental changes, regulatory changes, day-to-day life, or is it best to narrow what I post about?
I think it's good to have variety. So it sounds like you've been thinking about kind of a real variety. You've got to keep your content interesting. However, I will say actually being consistent so that you become known for something is also a really quite a valuable technique. So you can, there's nothing wrong with doing that. So actually, we've got a couple of people that we've seen that have become quite influential in, I think the retail industry, because what they do is their audience knows that every week they post something that's kind of a roundup of the best things that are happening, their viewpoint, their opinion on it. They almost become like a kind of source of great knowledge. If that's going to work for your business and you think that's a marketing technique, then definitely do that. But also, again, variety is good. If you're posting the same kind of thing every time, people are going to start becoming blind to it. So there is something good to the tactic of like, what's he going to talk about next? This was great. What am I going to talk about next? It's I think, yeah, it kind of does depend. But yeah, a bit of both, I think. Be consistent, but also have that variety.
We had founders submit questions before the event, some of which we've touched on already. A few of them maybe we could expand on. One said, "How do I balance personal storytelling with credibility when I'm still building traction?" So we've touched on this a little bit, but is there anything else that you'd want to share on that?
Yeah, I think really delving into what does credibility mean for you. So for some people, it might be I need to find a co-founder. So I need to show them that I'm a good person to work with, and credible, and I've got a good background and a good CV. For others, it might be I'm looking at getting that first customer, in which case credibility is really about industry knowledge. It's about being hot in the front of everything that's going on, having a viewpoint on that, being able to really spark debate, really challenge, perhaps traditional viewpoints, those kind of things. I think really, yeah, I think it really is looking at what credibility means. And if I was credible, I would be and almost write those things out. I would be trusted, I would have authority, I would be seen as a leader, those kind of things, and then try and figure your strategy out from there.
Who do you look to on LinkedIn or other channels that you think are doing it particularly well?
Oh, that's a really good question. There's quite a few people. For me, I don't think there's any individual people, but I know the things. I mean, I'm quite blind to these things because I work in the industry. I'm like, yeah, 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 yeah. I've heard these things before. So actually, the things that really make me stop are things where someone's doing something a bit different. So there is a guy that I follow who I actually know when he was actually in a different career, and he's changed his career completely and moved out to Bali, and is now starting a kind of villa business. And what he's posting about is kind of the journey of leadership in a different place, working with different cultures. And again, it's quite niche, it's quite unique, but it's really interesting. And every time he posts, I will really resonate with that. But his viewpoint, I don't know him well enough to know his strategy, but I think what he's trying to do is to appeal to people in the UK, in the US, and get them to think about investing in Bali, perhaps coming and, doing retreats there and stuff like that, which is so you can kind of see it. But instead of him saying, come to my retreat, this is what we're going to do, he's actually making me want to be curious about the country, which I think is really interesting. So yeah, I haven't really got anyone in particular, but it's the creative approach to content which always makes me interested.
I think to what you were saying about AI, like I think this is particularly when people's personal creativity has such a great chance to show
Yeah.
through and captivate. Um, Really good question here. We had one founder ask, how often do you see people molding their personality to the situation versus acting purely and authentically for the brand?
Sadly, I see the molding of your personality quite often. And again, I don't want to be kind of ostracizing people for doing that, because I think it just comes from not really knowing where to start and not having not being confident, I think, in really understanding. I think a common thing that we see is that you're so in the weeds with your business and your own knowledge and what you talk about all the time. You don't really know what it is that you're sitting on that's interesting.
Mm.
And sometimes having someone outside the business that can just say, do you know what, that's really fascinating, or so therefore the default is I feel like somebody over here has done this and it seemed to work for them, so I'm just going to kind of replicate it. So I think that's why it happens a lot. But I'm hoping that, you know, with more, as this whole world develops and you start to see more creative ways that people are posting, I think that creativity will continue to develop within people, because it's becoming part of the founders' skill set that they have to do. So yeah.
We have a question from Josby. She's asked, so I recently launched our first pilot, and last week involved sending an email every day to our early access list. This week I've toned it down once a week, maybe twice. Still trying to figure out what's the best frequency. How would you figure that out?
Yeah. So it's a little bit of testing, I think. I don't know if you've been doing any A/B testing on the emails that you've been sending out, but definitely look at that. I think, yeah, I would definitely tone it down. It depends on how friendly your early adopters list are, your easy early access list, and it might be that you are they're very used to you reaching out to them, but I think definitely starting to tone it down. And then really, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, like any form of communication, whether it's a post, whether it's PR, whether it's an email, really having a purpose and a point to what you're putting out. And it might be that instead of doing the kind of short bursts, you can do a longer newsletter once a month or something like that. I think there isn't really any hard and fast rule to it. And it's, as I said, it does kind of depend on how engaged and friendly your list are. But the last thing you want to do is, if you've got a lovely list, is to turn them off, because they're very valuable to have at the beginning. So yeah, I mean, and the other thing I guess you could do is ask them. You know, you could send them, maybe not this week if you if you've been emailing them a lot, but maybe the next time you email them, say, look, you know, thanks for listening over the last week. It's been an exciting time. We're trying to get a feel for how often you want to hear from us, and do a little poll and then see, you know, and then if the majority of your audience says like once a month is good, then you've kind of got a good note. And checking your open rates as well. I don't know if you're looking at those.
Can I speak?
Please.
Is it okay? Yes, I have been. So it's like 50% open rate,
That's good.
55%. I don't think that's good. And like click rate is 13%.
I don't know what the
and
industry
I
average
slowed
is
it
now,
down, but
yeah, I mean, the click rate is pretty good, because I mean the thing is, as we always say when we're looking at these kind of things, an open rate could just be someone looking at it on your phone,
yeah,
whereas actually the click is the thing that's quite
yeah.
important. And a 13% click rate is pretty good. I mean, direct mail is, you'll have to have a look at what the industry averages are just to see.
And I did try to do a poll, but people didn't engage with the poll. People clicked on well, if that was the CTA, the main CTA, I think they would have clicked on the poll, but there were other things in the email that they needed to do. So we are building a new way for people to consume news and make it participatory, so people make predictions. And that's why I was sending an email every day, because there was a new news story every day. But it was exhausting for me. It was like 3 hours of work every day. And then I decided to turn it down this week. We are also doing analysis on what people were doing last week and making changes based on that. But I don't know if building momentum means sending something every day, or building momentum means sending something once a week or twice a week. And
Yeah,
I'm sort of getting it.
thank you for explaining your business. I think doing it regularly is expected, because if someone's signed up to news, they're expecting to get a news roundup from you. So yeah, I would maybe try once a week to keep it like manageable for you, and then see how you go. But then absolutely consistency. If you're if someone's getting used to seeing something from you, then don't stop. Especially if you're getting fairly decent engagement rates. And yeah, you're just going to have to keep tracking it over time, I think.
Sorry, I just stuck you on mute there because we're picking up on some background noise. But if there's anything else that you want to add, feel free to ask now or put it in the chat. You guys, okay. I had another question from the list of people where people previously submitted questions on the topic of newsletters, and the question was suggestions on growing best ways to grow your newsletter list.
Amanda, do you have any weigh in on this? If you're still there. Yeah.
So yeah. So in terms of your newsletter, so we do a monthly newsletter, but we work with a newsletter company that completely supports us. But the feedback they provide us is that it really does need to be meaningful content. So with our newsletter, what we do is we repurpose that content, and on your LinkedIn business page, you can actually create a LinkedIn newsletter. So in addition to the database that you're collating, you've also got a kind of LinkedIn database as well, and that alerts your followers that a newsletter has gone out, and they can subscribe to that. So we do that. The suggestion is every now and again, remind people on your LinkedIn or whatever channels that you're talking to that you have a newsletter. You can have a bit of an email kind of sign up now at the bottom of your signature, make it really accessible to sign up on your website. So make it really obvious that you've got a newsletter to share. And also have a one-liner that really sort of summarizes who it's for and what it's going to do. I think so many people are like, sign up to our newsletter, but actually people don't know what's in that newsletter. So just make it as pain-free as possible for people. So that's kind of our strategy at the moment. But with regards to the database, I think this has been sort of a topic throughout the discussion today. Something that has really struck with me from a conversation a couple of months ago is that while LinkedIn is fantastic, while TikTok and all these other platforms are fantastic, actually what's really important is that you build your database, because if any of these channels went down tomorrow, you've suddenly lost your followers, your community. So wherever you are, constantly remind them like to send their email address for something, have a newsletter, or have an opportunity to give them exclusive access or something. But that's really struck with me, and something that we share with our clients a lot.
That's useful. I have a question, and founders, we have probably time for one more question too, if anyone wants to ask. So I started a Substack, and it's very much like, it's not so much a personal Substack, it's more hotbed related content, but kind of just like told through my own words and voice. And I was just wondering if you had any what you would advise for striking the right tone between keeping it relevant to hotbed and also adding a bit of personality in, and then how to go about like promoting that whilst making sure it's clear that it's linked to hotbed. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we should probably have a chat offline about this, because I think it's probably a bigger question, and maybe I can help you think about, because I'm actually just dabbling in Substack for a client at the moment. It's
Oh,
the first
really?
thing I've been doing. So yeah, why don't we do a little kind of post this, and we can compare notes, and I'll tell you what I know, and then you can tell me what you know.
I know very little. Yeah. No, that would be great. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, because I think it kind of comes down to your strategy at the end of the day as well. I think it's absolutely fine to have some personal stuff from you, because ultimately you are the head of that. Again, you are the founder of it. So being front and center is kind of expected, but it's just having that right balance between the two.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a few founders I've seen do it really well. Like, I just saw Andrew mentioned on here Beehive, the like new newsletter
yeah,
subscription platform. And the founder of that, his name's Tyler Dink, and
okay.
he has a newsletter that's very like relevant to the Beehive community, but also captures his personal life, things like that. He does a fantastic job at it.
Okay, yeah, that's really good. I've actually yeah, I'm going to take a little note to go and look
Yeah.
at that. So I love these. I love all these new things that come out. Hence why I'm a tech person. I'm kind of geek with these things. So thank you for the recommendation.
Well, we will wrap it there unless there's any final questions. We will be posting this recording either this afternoon or tomorrow. In the follow-up email, you'll get links to where you can find Kirsty and Amanda. And as just a reminder, we have a next Hotbed Summer session tomorrow on financial modeling, everything you need to know for forecasts, all that fun stuff that causes us all a lot of headaches. And we'll wrap it there. Thank you so much. Oh, Adam says, how do we reach Kirsty? Respectfully noting LinkedIn is not open to connect.
Oh, really?
Oh.
That's weird. I'm obviously sending off hostile